My boyfriend had a low sperm count. So when he found a baby abandoned on the side of the road, he begged me to give up my study abroad plans and adopt him. I agreed. We got married. 30 years passed. I poured my whole life into raising that child as my own. And then, the year our son finally built a stable life for himself, I was diagnosed with a terminal illness. The medical bills were crushing. One night, my husband and my son sat me down like they were holding a family meeting, their faces carefully arranged into something that almost looked like concern. The message was simple: I should stop treatment. It's terminal, my husband said, voice calm, practical. Why waste the money? My son didn't even hesitate. Mom, Dad's right. I have my future to think about. Don't be selfish. I remember staring at them, trying to understand how love could evaporate so completely, and how I could feel so cold and so humiliated in the same breath. After I died, my husband married his first love in a bright, cheerful ceremony, like grief had never existed in our house. And my son? My son hugged that woman and called her mom. That was when I learned the truth. That abandoned baby wasn't abandoned at all. He was my husband's child with his first love from the beginning. And the life I'd sacrificed, my dreams, my youth, my health, my family's wealth, had been nothing more than a convenient bridge for them to walk across. When I opened my eyes again, I was back. Back to the day Julian stood at my doorway holding a swaddled infant, looking at me like he was offering me a miracle. Serena, he said softly, pleading already. Can we keep him? I looked at him. Then I reached for the door. And I shut it. Take him to an orphanage, I said. Julian's face snapped tight with panic. He shoved the door with his shoulder before it could latch. What? How can you say that? I stared at him, at that righteous, practiced expression I'd once mistaken for kindness, and something bitter rose in my chest. Why not? I said. I know nothing about raising a child. His brows knit together like I was failing some moral test. Serena, this is a life. Look at him. He's helpless. We're getting married soon anyway. Wouldn't it be nice to raise a child together? Ahead of time? The words were so familiar it made my stomach turn. In my last life, I'd heard that same sincerity and believed it. I'd torn up my plane ticket with shaking hands because I thought love meant sacrifice and sacrifice meant virtue. My parents had wanted me to go overseas. They'd wanted me to chase everything I'd worked for. But for Julian, and for the baby in his arms, I'd given it all up. And in return, after I died, Julian inherited my family's enormous wealth and lived happily ever after with the woman he'd loved all along. And their child. So yes, the baby was alive. And yes, he was helpless. Which was exactly why he deserved to be somewhere safe, somewhere with trained caregivers and stability, not shoved into the arms of a woman being manipulated into surrendering her future. Julian hesitated, then brightened like he'd found the right hook. But, my mom can help you. I almost laughed. Help? In my last life, his mother helped for a few days. Then she suddenly suffered a stroke and became paralyzed, and I spent years juggling childcare and caring for her, cooking, bathing her, lifting her, sacrificing piece after piece of myself until I couldn't recognize the woman in the mirror. It wasn't until after she died that I found her medical paperwork and realized something that made my hands go cold. She hadn't been paralyzed. She'd simply decided that being cared for was easier than caring. I exhaled slowly, forcing my voice to stay even. Julian, I think I need to reconsider our relationship. His eyes widened. What? My parents have always wanted me to study overseas, I said. And I'm going to. I started to close the door again. Julian jammed his foot into the gap, his face tightening with urgency. Serena, wait. Don't do this. Don't be like this. Before he could say more, fast footsteps pounded up the walkway behind him. A young man, Mark, one of Julian's co-workers, ran up, breathless. Julian. Quick. The company needs you. Right now. Mark's gaze flicked to me, then to the bundle in Julian's arms. Something subtle shifted in his expression, like he'd seen this exact scene rehearsed before. And I did, too. It was always the same trick. Create a crisis. Create pressure. Make me feel responsible. Make me fold. Julian was supposed to rush to work, and I was supposed to soften and say, fine, leave the baby with me. Just for a little while. Of course. I can handle it. I'll figure it out. And then the baby would be in my home. In my life. In my arms. And Julian would be free. This time, I didn't plead. I didn't argue. I didn't chase him with questions like I used to. I just watched him calmly, hands clasped behind my back, my refusal clear. Mark kept urging him. Julian's jaw flexed. Then, like he decided I was a wall he couldn't talk through, he turned abruptly and shoved the baby into my arms. "Serena, please," he said, voice thick with desperation that sounded almost convincing. "I'll be back as soon as I'm done. I swear. Just hold him for now." The unexpected weight settled against me, warm and small, carrying a faint baby powder scent. And then Julian was gone. Vanished down the steps like the last 30 years hadn't happened yet. For a second, I stood there frozen, the baby pressed against my chest, and my body betrayed me, memory flooding in like a wave I couldn't stop. Racing to the hospital late at night when he spiked a fever. Crying with joy when he first called me Mom. Sitting on the edge of my bed years later, trembling with pain, begging Julian to take me to a doctor, only for him to glance up from his phone and tell me I was overreacting. And then my son's voice, cold and flat, "Mom, stop fighting it. Just let it go." I looked down at the baby's sleeping face. He was innocent. He was helpless. But I wasn't. Not this time. The next morning, urgent knocking jolted me awake. My parents stirred too, my mother muttering as she pulled on a robe, my father already frowning like he knew exactly who it was. Of course it was Julian. My mom opened the door with the politeness of a longtime neighbor. "Good morning, Julian. You're up early. Have you eaten? Come in, join us." The warmer my mother sounded, the tighter Julian's smile became. His eyes scanned past her shoulder, searching. Thank you," he said quickly. "I'm here to see Serena. And the baby." My mother blinked, genuinely confused. "The baby? What baby?" Julian froze, like the words hadn't landed the way he expected. "The little boy from yesterday. I gave him to Serena." I took a slow sip of my coffee, not even bothering to lift my eyes. Julian stepped forward, agitation rising fast. "Serena," he said, voice sharpening. "Where is he?" He reached for my arm, desperate enough to forget manners. My father moved instantly, his tone like iron. "Speak. Don't touch her." Julian flinched, then tried again with words instead of hands. "I really did give her a baby," he insisted, voice trembling. "Serena, please, where is the baby?" I let out a soft, almost amused breath. "You're really anxious," I said. "Why? Is the baby yours?" The living room snapped into silence. Julian's expression stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "I found him on the roadside," he said quickly, as if repeating the story would make it true. "So I put him back on the roadside," I said. My mother's mouth parted. "Serena." Julian's pupils tightened. "What did you say?" I stood up calmly, setting my cup down with deliberate care. "He was found there, right? So I returned him. Maybe the people who left him changed their minds and went looking. I thought I was helping." Julian grabbed my wrist so hard pain sparked up my arm. "Don't do this," he hissed. "Don't play games with me." My father surged forward again, and Julian released me like he'd been burned. I rubbed my wrist, forcing my voice not to shake. "I'm not playing. I need to pack. My study abroad program starts soon." "Study abroad?" Julian echoed, stunned. "How can you go abroad? Who's going to take care of the baby if you—" My mother turned between us, bewildered and alarmed. "Julian, what baby are you talking about? What is happening?" Julian inhaled hard, then forced a smile at my mom that looked like it hurt. "I'll explain later." Then he turned back to me, pleading again, like he could rewind the moment by sheer will. "Serena. Just tell me where he is. That's a life." My blood heated. My hand twitched at my side, a sharp, old instinct rising. And then a voice cut through the doorway from outside. Rachel from across the street poked her head in, face pale and frantic. "They found a baby in the community garden this morning. He was burning up, an ambulance just took him to the children's hospital. The poor little thing." Julian's face drained of color. He stared at me like he was seeing a monster. "You really threw him away," he rasped. I went still. Because I hadn't left the baby in the garden. I had placed him on Chloe's doorstep. Carefully. I'd even left a note. "So how?" Julian didn't give me time to think. He grabbed me and hauled me toward the door. "We're going to the hospital. Now." My father shouted his name, furious. My mother tried to block him, but Julian shoved past with reckless desperation. I was half dragged into a taxi before I could even catch my breath. Children's hospital. Julian barked at the driver, his voice shaking. "Please, hurry." In the backseat, he kept whispering, like a prayer. "He'll be okay. He'll be okay." I watched him with cold clarity. In my last life, when I'd been curled on the bed, feverish and shaking, begging him to take me to a doctor, Julian had told me to drink hot water and rest. Now, for this baby, he looked like his world was collapsing. It was always easier to be indifferent until pain touched something you claimed as yours. At the emergency department, Julian pushed through nurses and questions until he found the room. He pulled me down the hall, stumbling with urgency, and as we reached the door we heard a woman's sobs. When Julian shoved it open, Chloe was inside, cradling the infant, face streaked with tears, murmuring broken comfort against the baby's flushed forehead. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "It's okay. I've got you." Julian rushed in, eyes blazing, and then he turned on me, raw fury spilling out. "Are you happy now?" He snapped. "He has a high fever. He's struggling. He's just a baby, how could you be so heartless?" I looked at the child, small and fragile, and felt nothing. In my last life, they had drained me slowly, my opportunities, my strength, my youth, until there was nothing left but a woman they could dismiss with a cold voice and a clean conscience. So no. His life or death didn't undo what they'd done to mine. "Heartless," I repeated softly. Then I looked at Chloe. "Julian," I said, keeping my tone steady, "yesterday I placed this baby at Chloe's doorstep. I left a note." I paused, letting the implications settle like smoke. "So how did he end up outside all night? Only to be found in the community garden this morning?" Chloe's eyes widened, stunned. "Serena, what are you talking about? This is the first time I've seen him today." She swallowed hard, clutching the baby closer. "I'm a nurse here. I was transferred to pediatrics to help out. When I saw him brought in, alone, so sick, I couldn't just stand there. If you truly left him at my door, how could I possibly ignore him? You know me. You know what kind of person I am. I used to believe that. I used to think Chloe was gentle and innocent, so much so that when I gave up my spot at a prestigious overseas program, I asked my father to help her take it instead. I told myself I was happy watching my best friend live the dream I'd buried. I never imagined she would become Julian's first love again. I never imagined she would become the biological mother of the son I spent my life raising. I stared at her now, the pieces clicking together with a sickening precision. Julian watched Chloe cry, his expression twisting with something complicated, pain, guilt, longing, before his face hardened into a decision. He stepped forward, placing himself between Chloe, the baby, and me. "That's enough," he said quietly. "Chloe, I believe you." Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a document. He turned it toward me slowly, forcing the bold black letters into my line of sight. Adoption certificate. And beneath it, unmistakably, my signature. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I didn't even cry. I just felt that familiar, lethal stillness settle over me, the kind that comes right before something inside you snaps clean in half and turns into sharp, usable pieces. Because the adoption certificate wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the end. Years passed in a blur after that day, papers filed, names changed, stories rewritten until I became the villain in my own home for not being grateful enough to raise someone else's child. I endured a marriage that looked perfect from the outside and felt like a locked room from the inside. People told me I was lucky. That Julian was patient. That he stayed with me even though I couldn't give him a real family. I smiled. I cooked. I cleaned. I played the role. And when I turned 50, Julian died suddenly in a car accident. The town showed up the way they always do when a tragedy is simple enough to gossip about. Flowers. Condolences. Hands squeezing my shoulder like they were doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence. I nodded through it all with that same practiced calm. Then, after the funeral, when the house finally went quiet, I started sorting through his things. I don't know why I did it. Habit, maybe. Or the way grief makes you look for meaning inside objects because you can't bear to look for it inside your own life. In the back of his closet, behind winter coats that still smelled faintly like him, I found a small locked box. It took me 3 tries to get it open. And then the air in my lungs stopped moving. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, stacked neatly like a secret he'd curated with tenderness. Julian, younger. Chloe, younger. Their smiles pressed together in a way he had never smiled at me. Letters folded and refolded until the creases turned soft. Notes written in the kind of intimate handwriting people use only for someone they're saving themselves for. And then I saw it. A birth certificate. The mother line didn't have my name. It had Chloe's. The father line was Julian. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled like it was alive. I kept digging, numb, desperate, because some part of me still wanted a different explanation. A typo. A mistake. Anything that let me go back to believing I was simply unlucky, simply unwanted, simply married to a man with a problem he couldn't control. But the next thing in the box made me laugh out loud, one sharp, ugly sound that didn't belong to me. A marriage certificate. Not mine. Theirs. And under it, tucked like a final insult, was another document, one I recognized instantly. My own marriage certificate to Julian. I had seen it 1,000 times. I'd held it. I'd used it to prove I belonged in this family when his mother looked at me like a stray dog. But when I put mine next to his and Chloe's, the differences became obvious in a way that made my stomach turn. The paper quality. The seal. The registration number. Mine wasn't real. Mine was a prop. The truth hit me so cleanly, so completely, I couldn't even pretend to misunderstand it. Julian hadn't been unable. He had been unwilling. The cold, empty marriage wasn't an accident. It was a vow. Not to me. To her. He hadn't been saving his body because he was broken. He had been saving himself because I wasn't the one he wanted to touch. And the child I had raised, the one who called me mom, the one I'd held through fevers, through nightmares, through heartbreaks I soothed with my own hands, was never mine. She was theirs. Their daughter, brought into my home under my name so Chloe could keep her reputation clean, and Julian could keep his good husband mask polished. A convenient woman. A convenient marriage. A convenient life. That night, something inside me finally reached its breaking point. I remember standing in the living room with those papers spread across the coffee table like a crime scene, staring at the lies I'd lived inside for decades. My heart felt like it was trying to tear itself open. And then everything went black. When my awareness returned, I wasn't in my house. I was floating above it. Above my own body. Above the life I'd poured myself into. I watched the neighbors rush in. I watched my daughter, my adopted daughter, their biological daughter, arrive with red eyes that were too dry too quickly. I watched her grip the edge of the table and scan the documents, not with horror, but with calculation. And then Chloe arrived. Elegant. Calm. Dressed in mourning that looked like it had been tailored for her. My daughter ran into her arms. Mom, she sobbed, real sobs this time, the kind she'd never given me. Chloe stroked her hair, eyes glinting as she looked over my body like I was a piece of clutter someone forgot to throw away. She's gone, Chloe murmured softly. It's okay. It's over now. My daughter's voice cut through the room like a knife. Good, she said, wiping her face. She should have died sooner. She took what was never hers. My spirit went cold. They stood there in my home, surrounded by my furniture, my savings, my effort, and spoke about me like I was an inconvenience finally removed. Then my daughter reached for Chloe's hand and squeezed it. Don't worry, she said. Everything she had. We'll take care of it. Take care of it. Like I was already forgotten. Like my life was already theirs. And then, like the universe finally decided I'd suffered enough for one timeline, I opened my eyes again. I was staring into a mirror. My face was young. My skin smooth, untouched by decades of exhaustion and silent resentment. My hands were pale and soft, not split from years of scrubbing floors and washing dishes until my knuckles bled in winter. I blinked once. Twice. And then I pinched my cheek so hard it stung. Real. A door creaked open behind me. Here, Julian said, voice warm, familiar, like a man delivering kindness. He walked in carrying a steaming bowl of soup. Drink this. You're coming down with something. I froze. Because the Julian in the mirror's reflection wasn't a 50-year-old dead man from the coffin. He was young too. Early 20s, maybe. The face I'd once fallen for, before I learned how well it could lie. He set the bowl down, then brushed his hand across my forehead like he was checking my temperature. I'm going to go kill the chicken, he added casually, like we were just a normal couple having a normal holiday. It's New Year's Eve. We still have to do the family offering later. If I'm late, Mom will throw a fit. He smiled. Then he walked out. I stood there listening to his footsteps fade, my eyes snapping to the calendar hanging on the wall. 1995. New Year's Eve. The night everything truly started. The house was decorated with bright red paper blessings taped everywhere. The kitchen smelled like broth and garlic and the kind of warmth people mistake for safety. But my chest felt hollow. Because I knew what came next. In my last life, I'd met Julian through a matchmaker. We'd been strangers, polite and hopeful. Families had pushed. We'd rushed. We'd married. And then, on our wedding night, nothing happened. Not because I didn't want it. Not because I wasn't ready. Because Julian wouldn't. He turned his face away, pulled the blanket up, and said he was tired. Then, after enough nights like that, he finally sat me down and told me, with pained eyes and a trembling voice, that something was wrong with him. That he couldn't. That our marriage would have to be different. I'd been furious. Humiliated. Betrayed. I demanded a divorce. And Julian had dropped to his knees. He'd apologized until his voice went hoarse. He'd slapped his own face hard enough to leave marks, begging me not to leave, swearing he lied only because he loved me, because he feared I'd reject him if I knew. And back then, I'd believed him. Because I had already been abandoned once. My biological parents had wanted a son. When they saw a daughter, they left me in the snow outside someone else's house. My adoptive parents raised me with gentle hands and tired smiles. And then they died before I turned 10. After that, I grew up as an orphan with nobody to protect me and nobody to choose me. So when Julian chose me, I thought it was fate. I thought he was my light. And I compromised. Because even with the cold marriage, he played good husband beautifully. He cooked. He brought me warm drinks. He smiled for neighbors. He defended me just enough to look heroic, never enough to truly protect me. And then, 3 years into that marriage, on a New Year's Eve just like this one, he said the words that changed everything. He wanted to adopt a daughter. Chloe's daughter. Their daughter. In my last life, I had loved that little girl with a kind of desperate devotion that almost makes me sick now. I had poured everything into her because she was the only chance I thought I had to be someone's mother. And when I died, she took my inheritance and ran into Chloe's arms and called me a thief. I stared at the bowl of soup Julian had left on the table. It was still steaming. My heart was ice. I walked outside. Julian was in the yard, busy with holiday preparations, moving with the easy confidence of a man who believed his home belonged to him no matter who he heard inside it. I didn't offer to help. Instead, I dragged a chair into the sunlight and sat down. And, like clockwork, his mother noticed. She'd always noticed when I looked too comfortable. She gripped a broom and started sweeping near my feet, except the dust kept drifting toward my lap, toward my clothes, toward my face. The performance was petty and precise. All this celebrating, she muttered loudly, and that chicken still hasn't laid a single egg. She swept harder. Julian, she called, voice sharp. Later, kill that useless chicken, the one that won't lay eggs. No point keeping something that only eats and does nothing. I didn't flinch. Because I understood the real insult. 3 years married. No children. And she blamed me for it, every chance she got. Julian looked up, reading the moment the way he always did, like a man calculating the cheapest way to look kind. Mom, he said, scolding her gently. It's New Year's. Say less. Then he added, careful and loud enough for me to hear, Chloe's coming later, remember? Didn't you say you wanted to make dumplings the way she likes? His mother's face softened immediately, as if her mouth was capable of warmth after all. Right, she said, brushing imaginary dirt off her hands as she turned toward the kitchen. I'm going. Don't forget, she likes the chive filling. I watched her go. In my last life, I used to swallow moments like that and tell myself it didn't matter. This time, I let it matter. Julian came over and sat beside me with a sigh, like he was carrying the burden of keeping peace in a family that only ever asked me to shrink. My mom is just like that, he said. She doesn't know. You know. About my issue. His voice lowered, practiced empathy sliding into place. So she puts it on you? She's old. Her heart's not great. She has episodes. She probably doesn't have many years left. Don't take it personally. I almost smiled. Because I knew the truth about her heart problem too. In my last life, she lived longer than both of us. She survived fine when it mattered to her. She only became fragile when she wanted control. Julian patted my hand like I was a child. Just listen and let it go, he said softly. I pulled my hand back. And right on schedule, as dusk crept in and the house filled with the smells of food, Chloe arrived. She stepped into the yard carrying a bundled baby. My throat tightened, not with love, not with tenderness, but with recognition so sharp it felt like a blade. That baby. The child I raised. The child who would one day look at my dead body and say, good. Chloe's smile was bright and sweet, the kind people trust immediately. Julian's mother practically ran to her, her face transformed. Chloe, she exclaimed. You came all this way, and with a baby too, oh, give her to me. Grandma will hold you. Grandma. Not neighbor. Not friend. Grandma. She took the baby with the ease of someone who had done it many times before. Chloe's gaze swept the yard, and landed on me like a spotlight. She walked over with exaggerated warmth. Hi, Serena, right? I'm Chloe. I was sick when you and Julian got married, so I couldn't come. I'm so sorry. I brought gifts, I hope you like them. She pulled out expensive skincare bottles, placing them into my hands like she was giving charity. To anyone watching, she looked generous. To me, it looked like guilt dressed up as kindness. I set the bottles down and said, flatly, thanks. Julian's mother's eyes narrowed. Under her breath, she muttered, all that and you can only say 2 words. No education. No manners. Chloe is so much better. In my last life, I would have swallowed that too. I would have waited until later, whispered my hurt to Julian in the dark and watched him dismiss it with lazy reassurance because his heart was never fully in my corner. But I wasn't 22 anymore. I was a woman who'd lived to 50 and died of betrayal. I looked at his mother and smiled. Is thanks not enough? I asked. Should I say I don't want it? It's Chloe's thoughtfulness, I do like it. I tilted my head, voice gentle in a way that wasn't gentle at all. My adoptive parents passed away early. I only have you as a mom now. So if my manners are lacking, I guess I learned from the best. Julian's mother went still, her face pinched with shock. Julian's eyes flashed, annoyance, warning, control. A moment later, he grabbed my arm and tugged me into the kitchen, shutting the door like he could shut out consequences the way he shut out truth. Serena, he hissed, washing vegetables with harsh, fast movements. What was that? She's old. You didn't have to embarrass her. I watched him, the way his good husband mask slipped when no one else was looking. She has a heart condition, he added, always the weapon. We try not to upset her. Then he softened his voice, pivoting smoothly. And Chloe, she's a guest. She came with a baby. You handle the cooking? I'll go keep them company. A command, dressed as normal. Just like always. In my last life, I would have nodded and started chopping. This time, I washed my hands, dried them carefully, and walked out. In the living room, Julian was holding the baby, bouncing her gently, laughing at something Chloe said. Chloe's eyes were on him with a softness I had never once seen directed at me. His mother sat nearby, watching them like it was a scene she'd prayed for. A family. A real one. I cleared my throat. Chloe jolted slightly, scooting away from Julian as if she'd been caught. Oh, Serena, she said quickly. Julian just. He likes babies. She was fussy, and the second he held her, she calmed down. Maybe it means they have a kind of fate. I sat down and started eating without responding. Julian's mother looked like she wanted to explode at my lack of performance, but Julian shot her a look, one that said, not yet. Midway through the meal, the baby began to fuss again. Chloe put down her chopsticks and leaned closer to me, ankling the baby as if she was presenting a product. In my last life, my heart had melted at that tiny face. Now, my stomach turned. Julian's mother cleared her throat, eyes sharp with satisfaction. Serena, she said, as if she'd been thinking about it for months. You and Julian have been married 3 years. No kids. I've decided I'm not going to nag anymore. She paused dramatically. Chloe is going out of town for work. The man who got her pregnant ran off. She's unmarried, carrying a child, it's hard for her. So I thought, why don't you two adopt a baby? She smiled like she'd solved everyone's problems. You need a child. She needs help. And this baby is adorable. Chloe can't be dragging a baby around forever if she wants to find someone and get married. There it was. The plan. And no one, asked what I wanted. In my last life, I'd nodded quickly, grateful for crumbs. This time, I set down my chopstick slowly. I want to try for my own child first, I said. Julian's mother blinked, thrown off. I kept my voice steady, reasonable, because reason is harder to attack. I've heard there are fertility treatments now, I continued. IVF. I want to try. I'm not saying Chloe is bad. I'm just saying, if I don't even try, I'll regret it. I let the words land. I saw the flicker of panic in Julian's eyes. Because the 3 of them had already rehearsed this night. They had already decided my answer. His mother turned slightly toward him and muttered, low and irritated, why isn't she agreeing? I heard it anyway. Chloe's eyes shimmered instantly, tears summoned like a skill. She stood up with the baby in her arms like she was about to flee into a blizzard for dramatic effect. I get it, she said, voice shaking. Aunt Serena. You don't want her. I understand. Your mother-in-law is only trying to help me because I'm alone. Because you and Julian don't have children. She sniffed, wiping at nothing. I'll leave. I'll take her. Even if I have to struggle, even if I have to do the hardest jobs, I'll raise her myself. Julian's mother shot up like a firecracker. IVF? She screeched. Do you know how expensive that is? Are you trying to bankrupt us? You can't have kids naturally and you want to throw money away on science? You ungrateful. She grabbed her chopsticks and flung them. I moved my head slightly. The chopstick smacked into Julian's forehead instead, leaving a red mark. For a second, silence. Julian clutched his forehead, grimacing. "Mom," he snapped, forcing irritation into his voice like he was scolding her, but his eyes were on me, warning me to behave. "It's New Year's. Don't start." Then he turned to me and made the smallest, most familiar gesture. That look. The one that said, "Apologize. Make it go away. Be the bigger person. Be the quieter person." I didn't move. Julian exhaled hard and shifted tactics, the emotional blackmail sliding in. "Serena," he said, voice softening, "look around. It's New Year's Eve. The streets are empty. Everyone's inside with their families." He gestured toward the door where Chloe stood, still pretending to leave. "Chloe is young. Alone. With a baby. If she runs out there upset, who knows what could happen? And what will people say? The whole town knows we're close with her family. If she leaves like that, it'll look like we threw her out." He turned to his mother, playing mediator. "Mom, Serena has been sick," he said quickly, throwing me under the bus while pretending to cover for me. "She's tired. This isn't a big deal. Serena wants to try for a baby, fine, that's understandable. Don't get so angry." Every word sounded like support. Every word sharpened the tension between his mother and me. His mother's face twisted with rage. She slammed her hand on the table and pointed at me like I was a stain. "You married into this family and you've done nothing," she shrieked. "It's New Year's and you're giving me attitude? Do you even know your place?" Her voice climbed higher, uglier. 3 years and no baby. I offer you a child so you don't have to give birth, and you act like I'm hurting you. No wonder your real parents didn't want you. You should have died in that snow." The first part washed over me. But those last words, they hit the one place inside me that still bled. The room tilted. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. In my last life, those words had haunted me for decades. This time, they ignited me. I swept the dishes off the table in one violent motion. Food shattered onto the floor. Chloe gasped dramatically. Julian moved instinctively to shield his mother like a bodyguard protecting the true queen of the house. I walked up to his mother until I was close enough to see the satisfaction still hiding behind her outrage. "You want to talk about why there are no children?" I said, voice trembling with fury I no longer tried to swallow. "Why don't you ask your precious son?" Julian's face drained. The room went silent in a way that felt like the world holding its breath. 3 years, I continued, every word sharp. 3 years married and I'm still treated like I'm the problem. I leaned in. "Your son can't even touch me." "Not once." Julian flinched like I'd struck him. His mother's face didn't change much. Which told me everything. She had always known. She had always known and still called me useless, still called me barren, still called me the chicken that wouldn't lay eggs. I laughed once, bitter. "And you," I said to her, voice low, "you talk about me being unwanted. Your husband died early, was that your fault too?" Her eyes widened. Julian lunged forward, trying to block me. I swung my hand without thinking, more reflex than intention, and my palm cracked across Julian's cheek. Not hard enough to injure. Hard enough to mark. A red handprint bloomed instantly. Chloe let out a shriek, high and theatrical, like she was an alarm system meant to summon witnesses. And it worked. Neighbors poured in, drawn by the sound and the holiday curiosity. People crowded our doorway, craning their necks, eyes bright with the thrill of other people suffering. Julian's mother dropped to the floor immediately, clutching her knees like a woman in a tragedy. "Oh, I've sinned in my life," she wailed. "My husband died early, I raised my son alone, and now my daughter-in-law treats me like this." She pointed at me with trembling fingers. "She can't have a child," and I said one thing, just one thing, and she attacked me. I only suggested adopting Chloe's baby. Chloe is unmarried, struggling, and Serena pushed her away. A few neighbors gasped sympathetically. One of her friends stepped forward, frowning at me. "Serena, your mother-in-law is usually good to you. She wasn't forcing you. She just suggested. Why hit her?" Julian stepped into the center of the room like a man stepping onto a stage. He turned to me with that familiar pressure in his eyes. "Serena," he said, voice firm but gentle, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at all these people watching. It's New Year's. Don't make this ugly. Apologize to my mom and let's move on." He started to reach for my hand. I stepped back. And then I pulled something from my pocket. A folded piece of paper. The room quieted when I unfolded it slowly, the way you do when you want people to feel the weight of what you're about to show them. I held it up. "This," I said clearly, "is the baby's birth certificate." People leaned in. I pointed at the lines with steady fingers. "Mother, Chloe. Then I slid my finger down. Father, Julian. The air sucked out of the room. Julian's mother stopped crying mid-wail. Julian's eyes went wild. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed, her face pale beneath the makeup. What? Someone whispered, does that mean? It means, I said, voice calm in a way that surprised even me, that my husband's name is on another woman's child's birth certificate. Julian lunged toward me, reaching for the paper. I shifted, and he stumbled over the edge of a fallen chair, crashing down hard enough to make the neighbors flinch. His mother sprang up instantly, her performance gone, turning feral. You little, she snarled, trying to claw her way toward me. A couple neighbors grabbed her arms, holding her back more out of shock than loyalty. Birth certificates aren't fake, someone muttered, suddenly uncertain. Julian scrambled upright, wiping his hands on his pants like he could wipe away the moment too. He forced a laugh, thin, desperate. Everyone, listen, he said quickly. This is a mistake. Chloe was unmarried, going into labor, and the hospital needed someone to sign paperwork. I've known her since childhood. Our families are close. I signed as a guardian and the hospital must have, entered my name wrong. It's the hospital's fault. He said it like repeating it could make it believable. But the room wasn't buying it. Not fully. Not with Chloe's face trembling and his mother's eyes burning holes into my skull. So I reached back into my pocket. And I pulled out 2 small booklets. Marriage certificates. I placed them on the table with deliberate care. Look, I said, voice cool. If it's all a mistake. I flipped one open. Julian and Serena. Then I flipped the other open. Julian and Chloe. A collective gasp swept the room. 2 marriage certificates? Someone choked. How? He's married to both? Another whispered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Bigamy, I said simply. That's a crime. Julian's face twisted with panic. Chloe edged closer to him, clutching the baby like a shield, whispering urgently, Julian. What are we going to do? You said you hid everything? Julian's jaw clenched. Then something in him hardened. He turned toward the neighbors, forcing them out with sharp words and angry gestures until the last curious face disappeared and the door slammed shut. The house went quiet. Too quiet. And then Julian did something that told me all I needed to know. He walked to Chloe. He put his arm around her. Not carefully. Not secretly. Proudly. He turned back to me with a sneer. Fine, he said. You wanted the truth? Here it is. He looked me up and down like I was something he'd tolerated out of pity. If Chloe and I hadn't broken up back then, do you think I would have chosen you? He scoffed. Go look in a mirror. You'll never compare to her. My skin prickled, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of flinching. I can't even stand looking at you, he continued, voice cruel, the mask fully off. That's why I never touched you. That's why I... He cut himself off with a disgusted laugh. Our marriage certificate is fake, he said. Chloe is my real wife. Always has been. I was going to be generous and keep you comfortable, but you had to cause trouble. He pointed toward the door. Gab. Chloe smiled faintly, eyes glittering with victory. You kept calling me Chloe, like I was just a neighbor, she said, voice sweet and poisonous. Serena. You really thought you were his wife? I laughed. It startled them both. Because I wasn't laughing from pain. I was laughing from relief. Leaving this house was all I'd ever wanted. But I wasn't going to leave empty-handed. I reached into a drawer and pulled out a paper I had prepared. I set it on the table and slid it toward Julian. Sign this, I said. He glanced down. His face changed instantly, anger flashing hot. Are you serious? You live in my house, you eat my food, and now you want money? I sat down calmly, folding my hands like a woman with nowhere left to be afraid. I don't care, I said. Don't pay me if you don't want to. Julian blinked, thrown. I nodded toward the window. But everyone already knows what you are. I held his gaze. I have no parents. I can leave tonight and no one will care. But you? You and Chloe still have to live here. Work here. Face people here. Julian's nostrils flared. I smiled slightly. So sure. Refuse. And tomorrow I'll take copies of those documents to your workplace. To hers. I'll tell them you committed fraud. I'll tell them you married 2 women. I'll ask them how they feel employing people who built their lives on lies. His mother spat on the floor and shouted that I was shameless. I met her eyes without blinking. You helped him deceive me, I said quietly. You tried to make me raise their child. And you still think I'm the shameless one? Her face contorted. But fear is louder than pride when it comes to a son's job and a family's reputation. She stormed into her room and came back with a small box. Inside were stacks of money wrapped in cloth. She thrust it at me with a hand that shook from rage. I took it. I counted it. And in my mind, I measured it against 3 years of my youth. This was what my life was worth to them. I didn't argue. I just packed a small bag, the few things in that house that were actually mine, and walked out into the cold night. The street was quiet, holiday fireworks popping in the distance, laughter drifting from other homes. I stood under the dark sky and looked down at my hands again. Young hands. Unbroken hands. Everything was still possible. So I left town. I went south, to a small place where nobody knew my name and nobody cared about my past. The 90s were a different world, cash businesses, hustle, people hungry for something new. And I had something most people didn't. I had decades of memory. I used the money Julian's mother handed me like it was blood money, seed money. I opened a small diner. Nothing fancy. A few tables. A hot griddle. Food that made people feel seen. It started slow. Then word spread. Then the lines started forming before I even unlocked the door. 6 months in, I opened my second location. Then a third. And when I had built something solid enough that my future couldn't be taken away with one cruel sentence, I wrote letters. Not to Julian. To their employers. I detailed everything, the fake marriage, the double marriage, the birth certificate, the attempt to dump a child on a woman they planned to erase. I didn't have to exaggerate. Truth was ugly enough. And because I was thorough, I didn't stop there. I paid someone to hang a banner, quietly, late at night, outside Chloe's parents' workplace, calling out the betrayal and the scam, the way they tried to trick someone into raising a child and then stealing everything she owned. Chloe's parents were respectable people. Respectability doesn't survive public shame. They got sick. They fell apart. The town that once would have swallowed me whole finally turned on them. Years passed. My business became a chain. My name became something people respected. And then, more than a decade later, on an ordinary night when I was about to close one of my restaurants, the bell over the door rang. I looked up, and my breath went still. Julian walked in. Older. Much older than he should have been. He looked like a man the years had chewed up and spit out. Beside him was a teenage girl holding his hand. And even though she was thin, sun-darkened, hair tangled, clothes worn, I recognized her instantly. Their daughter. The child they'd once tried to hand me like a gift. She wasn't glowing like a princess the way she had in my last life when I raised her with soft blankets and careful love. This version looked tired. Too small for her age. Like someone who had never been protected. They sat down without ordering. Julian stared at me like he'd been starving for this moment. The girl stood up and walked toward me, eyes glossy with performance. "Mom," she whispered, tugging my sleeve. "I'm hungry. I missed you. We searched everywhere for you." I didn't move. I didn't correct her. I just looked at her the way you look at a stranger who thinks they can reclaim you. In my chest, something clicked. Because that look in her eyes. It didn't belong to a teenager. It belonged to someone who had already lived and lost. She remembered. She had come back too. I tilted my head like I didn't understand. "What are you talking about?" I said lightly. "I don't know you." I glanced toward the door. "If you're not ordering, you need to leave. I'm closing. My husband and my daughter are waiting for me." Julian shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped. "Husband?" he echoed, voice cracking. "Serena. You married? How can you marry? You loved me." I continued cleaning the counter like he was just another customer making noise. "Why can't I marry?" I said, not even looking at him. "You and I were never real. You made sure of that." Julian's hands trembled. "And you bring her here," I added, nodding toward the girl, "and you let her call me Mom? Does Chloe know you're doing this?" At Chloe's name, Julian's face twisted like he'd swallowed something sour. He inhaled, ragged. "After you left," he said hoarsely, "we moved. I had just gotten promoted back then. But then someone reported me. They fired me. Chloe. She wasn't fired, but people talked. Her parents got sick. His voice faltered, they died." He wiped at his eyes with the heel of his hand, but the tears looked more like self-pity than grief. "We went back," he continued. "But everyone knew. Nobody would hire me. I worked whatever jobs I could to feed us." He swallowed, eyes shining with desperation. "Then Chloe. She met someone with money. She left. She left me and our daughter. Just like that." The girl's mouth tightened. Julian's voice dropped. "And now I'm sick. It's serious. I don't have long." He looked at me like he was trying to summon the woman I used to be. "You raised her in the last life," he whispered. "You loved her like she was yours. Please. Help her. She called you mom for decades. I stared at him with a calm that felt like steel. He thought he could use love as a leash again. He thought I was still that starving girl grateful to be chosen. I wasn't. Before I could respond, the bell over the door rang again. Mom. A bright voice called. A little girl ran in, dressed in a pretty coat, hair neat, cheeks pink from the cold. She threw herself into my arms like it was the safest place in the world. Dad said you were taking too long, she chirped. So he brought me to pick you up. My hands moved automatically, smoothing her hair. Go wait in the car with Dad, I said gently. I'll be right there. Okay. She sang, skipping back out. Silence filled the room like smoke. Julian and the teenage girl stood frozen, staring at the child who looked like my reflection brought to life. No amount of denial could turn that into adoption. Julian's face collapsed in real time. The girl's eyes sharpened with something ugly, envy, hunger, panic. She lunged forward, trying to copy what my daughter had done, arms lifting as if she could force closeness. I stepped aside. And finally, I stopped pretending. I know you remember, I said to her, voice low. Her breath caught. I looked at Julian. Both of you, I continued. Last time, I gave you everything. I gave you my youth. My money. My love. My life. My voice didn't shake. That was the strangest part. And what did you give me? Julian opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. You lied to me for decades, I said. All of you. You used a fake marriage. You tried to make me raise your child so you could live clean and comfortable. And when I died, you took what I left behind and ran to Chloe and called her mom. The teenage girl's face crumpled. This time, the tears looked real. Mom, Serena, she choked. It wasn't like that. Chloe, she treated me horribly. She only wanted your money. She lied. She took everything from me. Her voice broke. She hurt me. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Understanding slid into place. So that was it. She didn't regret betraying me because it was cruel. She regretted it because it didn't pay off. I let out a soft, cold laugh. You don't know what you did wrong, I said. You just learned the other side wasn't kinder. Julian stepped closer, eyes bloodshot. Serena, he whispered, we. Get out, I said simply. The words weren't screamed. They didn't need to be. The teenage girl reached for me again, desperate, but Julian grabbed her arm and pulled her back, angry, humiliated, defeated. As he dragged her toward the door, he looked over his shoulder one last time. Serena, he said, voice rough, we were wrong. All of us. I didn't answer. I locked the door behind them. And for a second, I felt something, an old instinct, like someone was watching me. I didn't turn around. Some things don't deserve my attention anymore. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. Inside was a transfer receipt, money, and a letter. Julian's apology. He wrote that his illness couldn't be cured. That he sold what little he had left. That he left some for his daughter and sent the rest to me as compensation. Compensation. As if you could calculate a stolen life and pay it back with a number. I folded the letter and set it aside. That night, I tucked my daughter into bed the way I had always dreamed of doing, without fear, without bitterness hovering at the edges of every lullaby. She curled into my arms and blinked up at me sleepily. Mom, she murmured, tomorrow's the weekend. Can you and Dad take me out? I kissed her forehead, smiling. Of course, I whispered. We will. And as I held her, feeling her steady breathing against my chest, I understood something with a clarity I'd never had before. The past had already been erased the moment I stopped letting it define me. Everything Julian tried to steal from me, my love, my future, my right to be someone's first choice, was gone from his reach. Because this time, my life belonged to me. And no name on any document could ever change that again.